Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's OhioX Live on growing the coastal pipeline. I'm really excited for this conversation. We're joined by three Ohioans who have built careers and companies between San Francisco Bay Area and New York City. We're going to hear directly from them about how they did it, what was great about the Buckeye State and their experiences having worked in both the Midwestern ecosystem and then those on the coast. OhioX, for those of you that don't know, since we have a really diverse group joining us today, we're a statewide technology and innovation partnership. So we're a nonprofit, member-based organization with the goal of uniting and promoting those that are growing Ohio's economy through tech and innovation. We have a really diverse group of companies and organizations that have joined us and people. Just launching in December, we have everything from Fortune 500 publicly traded companies, universities, hospitals, software firms, IT firms, startups, and more. So it's been really rewarding and fun to see all the diverse technology and innovation that is happening in Ohio. If you're interested in learning more about us, you can go to ohiox.org, www.ohiox.org. But without further ado, I'll get into introducing our guest panelists. And before I do, folks are able to submit questions via the chat. So our first person, Matt Golis. Matt is a native Ohioan and graduate of Miami University. After college, he moved to the Bay Area where he spent 20 years building companies, including as the co-founder and CEO of Yapstone. About 2 years ago, Matt moved his family to Columbus when he founded GiveGame, which revolutionizes employee giving. We're also joined by Matt Booter Shapiro. Matt is a native Ohioan who grew up in the Cleveland area. After college, he moved to New York City where he founded MedPilot and he's currently the chief marketing officer as well. MedPilot is a leading patient engagement and relationship management solution. So Matt, welcome. And then finally, Jennifer Royer. I don't believe, Jennifer, you're a native Ohioan, but you are new to Ohio. In the past couple of years. You're a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton School of Business, and you've also worked on both coasts for companies like Deloitte and DocuSign. And then about a year or so ago, Jennifer moved to Columbus, Ohio to join Olive as head of product market and go-to-market strategy. So thank you all again for joining us, and we'll kickstart this with Matt Booter. You built a company in New York City, MedPilot, and just a couple years ago, you guys made a lot of headlines because you decided to move the company from New York City to Cleveland. Let's start by talking a little bit about that.
Sure. So we definitely confused our investors a little bit when we sprung the decision on them. We had been in New York for a couple of years, and there were about 5 of us at the time, all crammed in a little WeWork. You know, it was a kind of a point of inflection for our company where we knew we were about to go into a growth phase. And as first-time entrepreneurs, you know, you struggle with a lot of things. One of them is raising capital, and you know, people weren't exactly throwing money at us. And so we realized that going into the growth phase, we had to be very strategic with how we did this with the small amount of capital that we had. And so 2 of the co-founders, myself and Nathan Spoden, both grew up in Cleveland, myself in Shaker Heights, Nate in Mentor. And so we did have some fond feelings about Cleveland, which helped elevate it in the list. But really, we just looked at it as an incredible healthcare city, great customers out here, which also leads to a lot of employee talent for us. Obviously, the value is great. And, you know, really every decision was weighted towards Cleveland, except for the trying to find money. We did not think this would be a particularly easy place to fundraise. Even so, we came here and we have been blown away by the support we've got from the community. Within a couple months of moving here, we raised a pretty big round, all from Cleveland investors. It was just like a very palpable energy of people wanting to help everyone around them. And every time I talked to one person, they'd introduce me to 3 other people, and it's just a very warm community. So ended up being by far the best decision our company ever made.
And then Matt Golis, a couple of years ago, after spending a couple decades in Silicon Valley building companies, You and your family moved to Columbus, which you're originally from, I believe. What
Correct.
led to that and growing a new business here in Central Ohio?
Well, I was at a bit of an inflection point. I mean, a couple of years ago, a little over 2 years ago at this time, I was literally looking at office space in downtown San Francisco, downtown Oakland, was still living in the Bay Area, and just realizing that, you know, the war for talent and obviously all the other costs that come with running a business on the coast was just simply not something I was really looking forward to, particularly because I was going to be bootstrapping it. So without having a lot of investor capital to spend, you know, I was really looking at, okay, how can I more cost effectively, you know, start this new venture, as I had been involved with one venture, actually still on the board of Yapstone, but had been involved with one venture for almost 20 years. So from that perspective, I also saw it as an opportunity from just a personal perspective to move back to Columbus. Thankfully, my native California wife was cool with it, having had some of her own relatives actually in the Ohio area as well. So we moved back, and it's absolutely been tremendous. I mean, there has been absolutely no, I haven't taken a step back in anything from, you know, attracting talent to, you know, being able to leverage a lot of the resources that are here specific to GiveGame, the new venture, you know, just as Matt was mentioning, with the strong healthcare community. I mean, in Columbus, as it relates to GiveGame, we have a strong, both nonprofits community. There's also a lot of electronic payments and other companies that are complementary to what we do and sort of is the world that I come from. So it has just been an unbelievable transition. And I can't even imagine starting a company, quite honestly, in the Bay Area right now, because as I mentioned, the war for talent, you know, being a startup and having to attract folks and retain them when they're just constantly getting bombarded with job opportunities with both big companies and obviously more well-funded companies is just tremendous. And obviously a lot of that has changed now. You know, you have a lot of these earlier stage startups that are out there having to lay off people, but I can tell you, and interestingly enough, I'm actually in California right now for a few weeks on vacation, but I'll tell you, the exodus is real. You know, rents are down over 10% year over year in San Francisco, and in real estate in the city is absolutely dropping precipitously. So this aspect of, you know, attracting talent and people working wherever they are is absolutely real. And I think you're going to see this next generation of companies that really become the next unicorns. You're going to find a higher percentage of them not coming from the coasts.
And then Jennifer, and correct me again, I mentioned I don't think you're from Ohio originally, but
I am actually.
Oh, you are? Okay. What part?
I'm from Menor. I'm from Northeast Ohio.
Okay, great. Yeah. So sorry about that. I know
No
you
worries.
spent time in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Boston, Silicon Valley, both for, you know, incredible opportunities, business school at Wharton, and then professional opportunities. And before moving back to Ohio, you were in Silicon Valley working for DocuSign. But what was your path and kind of evolution like from working in big coastal hubs and then deciding to move back to Ohio?
Sure. So I'm your classic boomerang who, if you had asked me at multiple points in my adult life if I would end up back in Ohio, I might not have said yes. But after living on the East Coast for about a decade and then out in the Bay Area almost 6 years, as luck would have it, I met my husband, who is from Dublin, Ohio, in San Francisco. And we were both at points in our professional lives and our personal lives that led us to really want to come back to Ohio. Professionally, you know, it was very exciting to be in the Bay Area with all of the growth and technology that happens there. It's really a hotbed of that activity. But it's harder, I think, to kind of carve out your own space and in such a crowded atmosphere. And so I personally was looking to take on a more elevated leadership role in a high growth company and kind of a more intimate community, which I think Columbus has, for sure, was able to actually meet some folks at Drive Capital who introduced me to a lot of great companies here in Central Ohio. And my husband was also looking to make a career move. So it was kind of the right time for us to be thinking about where we go next. We did not see ourselves having a house and a family in the Bay Area because the cost of living is you know, a pretty penny there. And all of our family is back in Eastern Standard Time, either Ohio or the East Coast. And so we wanted to be closer to them. It's hard when you have to fly out for a weekend and probably spend little more than the time you were on a plane with the people you love. So we had kind of those dual motivations really taking us back here. And I've loved being in Columbus. I had never lived here before. I came a few times for, I think, volleyball tournaments in high school. That was about the extent of it. But it is really more of a tight-knit community of entrepreneurs and leaders. And I found that growing my network here has been really fulfilling. In Silicon Valley, it's, you know, I had all walks of my life there, and it does get to feel a bit crowded. So I found a great home in Columbus, both professionally and personally.
And Jennifer, you work at Olive, which for those that don't know is a Columbus-based healthcare, does a lot of work in AI, artificial intelligence and tech. But recently, at least, I don't know if this was in the works before or if it was in some ways part of companies' responses to COVID, but your company announced a pretty big kind of announcement around creating the grid, which is the future of work, and building out, you know, kind of different hubs. And it's not so much, at least my understanding, where we hear about Facebook and Twitter and Square and some of these others going to, you know, half and half remote work. But this is a bit of a different take on kind of remote working and building teams. Could you describe a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I found this so refreshing, and it's, as we have endured through COVID and quarantine times, I think as leaders, we're finding ourselves every day at just questioning what can we do differently, what can we do better. And so it was really, with everything going on, led us to roll out this model. And the central premise is we want to hire the most talented people to do the best work that they can from wherever they feel most productive. And so our headquarters, our hub, is still in Columbus, but we, over the past year, have expanded dramatically across the continental US, particularly as we have some of our customers taken on greater investments in enterprise-wide investments in our technology. So we're essentially co-locating our Olivians in those healthcare settings, directly in their hospitals. And so we've, just by virtue of the way we've grown, we have a pretty significant presence in a lot of other areas that are not Columbus. And so with the communication and work environment that we've been able to maintain, you know, starting in mid-March, what we realized as a company was we're actually very productive and well-connected in this environment. And so why limit ourselves? Why limit ourselves to say, you must be here, you must be there? Even for those of us who live and work, you know, regularly in Columbus, if some folks are more comfortable working out of their home office, they're still on the grid. And so it's really left to an individual's discretion where they can really do the best work of their lives. And I think that's really empowering. We've seen some employees come out of the woodwork and say, I've been waiting for 5 years to move to Florida, and I can finally do it. And I know I have the support of Olive. So I think it's been really great for us, and something that we rolled out kind of on the earlier side as the dialogue around the future of work was changing.
And then Matt Booter, moving MedPilot from New York City to Cleveland, and you touched on some of this in your opening comments, but how much of did the fact that Ohio has really an incredible history and does incredible work with healthcare, and you think of in Cleveland just alone, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, Metro Health, and then just go down 71 and you're in Columbus in a couple hours, where there's Ohio State University, Wexner Medical Center, and others. But how much did that go into part of the decision to move back to Ohio, and then also just kind of picking Cleveland and some of the aspects and benefits of being here in the Buckeye State?
Definitely. It played a very, very large role. When we touched down in Cleveland, immediately, like, we did some press around it, and all of the major healthcare organizations here reached out to us. And you just don't see that in a lot of cities, definitely not in New York or probably SF, mostly because there's a million people in the startup community. And here, we were really made to feel special right off the bat, and reached out to by, senior executives at all health systems. Groups like Bioenterprises reached out to us, and we became part of that community. Jumpstart, reached out to us, and they're an investor of ours, and set us up with meetings with all the healthcare providers that we wanted to meet. And so right off the bat, we really, really grew because of that community. We went from, working with like tens of thousands of patients to over 1 million really quickly, just because of Cleveland, and, being able to work with actually at this point 2 of the 3 health systems in some capacity has been critical for us. And I think that, not just the fact that there's a lot of customers here, since they're such large organizations, there's a ton of talent that comes out of that. And we've hired a slew of people that worked at the clinic and at UH and at Metro. And it's really just like you can start to see this ecosystem forming. And I think the number one helpful thing for us about being in a smaller town like Cleveland compared to a New York or an SF is just that everyone wants to help you here. People really, really want to see each other succeed. It's not like you're competing against anyone. I mean, even people in our industry that kind of look like competitors, we're still like reaching out and setting up meetings, because if one of us succeeds, we all start to succeed. And the more talent that comes here because they think there's good startups here, the better it is for all of us as entrepreneurs, and likewise as investors. So I think it's been very, very helpful.
And then Matt Golis, spending so much time in Silicon Valley, and I'm sure there's been a ton of evolutions between from when you first moved out there and some of the things you've experienced and been through. But having grown companies and scaled companies out there, and then now doing that here in Columbus and Central Ohio, what were some of the kind of big things that you noticed right away in those first 3, 6, 9 months after you moved back and started getting into the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, and Matt just hit on it, is this general sense that a rising tide raises all boats. That simply doesn't occur, I can tell you, in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And I'm sure it's probably consistent with that in New York as well. I mean, there's definitely this feeling that, we can all work together. Someone mentioned earlier, I mean, you could contact 2 or 3 people and instantly get connected with 30 more. That type of thing just simply doesn't happen. I mean, people not only don't necessarily make time for you because they're so busy growing scaling their businesses wherever they are, and there's thousands of them. But in Columbus, I mean, the speed that we were able to attract talent simply by word of mouth, we've never posted a job posting in a traditional sense. The speed that we were able to get office space. I mean, I went from getting this super cool office space that we were in right next to Wolf Ridge Brewery to actually getting free space where we still are today, right at Nationwide Arena, which is phenomenal. And again, this is just like with startup people, smart people just wanting to work with each other to build something great. And I think everyone knows, and this is something where I think is also very different, is that, what's the motivation for entrepreneurs to really start a business and do well? If you were to ask a lot of people in the Bay Area, I mean, a lot of them is because, quite honestly, they want to get very wealthy. I mean, they may want to change the world. There's a handful of them that truly want to change the world. But I think the big difference here is I think people come here, and I think it's special, particularly for boomerangs. So like Jennifer and myself, and also Matt too. But I mean, we know that we are actually a part of raising up I mean, Ohio, from kind of what the rest of the world's perception of it is to what it really can be. And quite honestly, I mean, as much as I love like what I'm doing and what GiveGame does, I think that aspect of really being able to make a difference in Ohio in a unique way, where even if you become wildly successful in San Francisco, it's just a rounding error. I mean, you know, you have to be a unicorn for anyone to even care almost. And to get any kind of media attention, attracting talent, et cetera. I mean, you can really make a difference and not have to be $1 billion valuation success here. And you are absolutely raising the economy, and you're a part, you know, of making Ohio great. And I think specific to Columbus, I mean, you know, being able to not be viewed as sort of the third fiddle to Cincinnati and Cleveland. I mean, you know, Columbus, when I was growing up here, we had just over 1 million people. It's now almost 2 million people. I mean, this is a completely different city than the one that I grew up in. And attracting and kind of getting that story out to those folks that are now starting to think about leaving the coasts, I think is just incredibly critical. Because I think a lot of people that haven't been here in a long time would not recognize the Ohio they'd be coming back to.
And then Matt Booter, and then we'll go to Jennifer next. But you've spent time hiring people in New York City, so you know, one of the biggest metro hubs in the world. And then having been in Cleveland, excuse me, for a couple of years now, what has been the process, I guess? Is there a difference kind of that MedPilot has taken between looking for talent in the Cleveland market versus New York City, or are they very much similar? And it's just been about getting the right person, and there really hasn't been much. So what has that experience been like?
It's a good question. I think it's an important point about people that are, you know, potentially looking to come to Cleveland to start companies is, you know, similar to what Matt said, we've never had to really post traditional like jobs on all the normal listings. You know, you do it just because that's part of how you recruit. But honestly, like 90+% of the people that have come to work at MedPilot have just reached out to us. They read about us, they saw us on TV, or they met us at an event. And it's like, as an entrepreneur, like there's nobody you want to hire more than someone that actually has just been like researching your company, knows about you, and following your progress. And so I think that, you know, because the community is tight knit and small, like everyone starts to know each other. You start to see the same familiar faces, and it's very, very helpful because, you know, you kind of get that normal vetting the same way you're going to date someone that maybe is a, you know, referral from a friend a little bit easier. You know, in the startup community, like most people know everyone around them, so you can get vetted very easily and get past that stage.
And Jennifer, and I believe you even have an open position on your team right now, or maybe you filled it, but
I do.
I guess you can give it a bit of a plug. But then building a team in Columbus versus either Boston or San Francisco, what has that experience been like on your end?
Yep. So I would say for the function I lead, specifically product marketing, there's definitely a difference between Bay Area and Central Ohio, and that product marketers are a dime a dozen. And as Matt mentioned earlier, the war on talent is very real in the Bay Area. So we would often get kind of outbid by Salesforce or Google, even at DocuSign, when we were hiring candidates. But there, you know, nearly all the resumes I got were product marketing manager, or could be. It's a less common role here. I think even the product management function is one where you kind of, in Central Ohio, I think you kind of grow into it, as opposed to maybe there's this wide army of product and product marketing folks. But it's not necessarily a bad thing, because what I'm looking for when I hire, and it's the same was true for consulting as it is at Olive, is kind of really smart, nimble athletes. And it's important for my function, but the passion that folks bring to the company, the mission, the product, and their ability to really navigate a lot of gray area and have a really sharp strategic mind is important. And that to me does not mean you have to have had a certain title or role in the past. There are a lot of great companies in Columbus that produce a lot of really excellent marketers and leaders, and all sorts of across all sorts of different functions. And so I've found success looking in places where you might not expect. I think what the math said about the kind of word of mouth is true. I've been really positively surprised at how many individuals I speak to who say, I've been following Olive for years. And for the size that we are, I wouldn't, like, if you had that equivalent in San Francisco, a mid 200 employee size company, like, you probably don't have disciple-like following out there, but it's definitely something I see here, and it's really kind of cool. I think the Midwestern work ethic is really encouraging and refreshing in that we want to hire folks who are really committed to what we do, and we can kind of learn and grow together. And so while the talent pool may look a little different by titles or roles that folks have had in the past, I think there's a great pool to draw on here and really bring into the fold. And we've hired a lot of folks in other divisions of the company who have gone through Tech Elevator and other programs because they're really just that committed to that vocation and that trade. And I think that's really great.
Matt Golis, even pre-COVID, you have been very bullish on the opportunity of leaving Silicon Valley and coming to places like Columbus and Ohio. What do you think with COVID now? Does the exodus that you had been seeing and the advocating for increasing opportunity outside of the coastal area, how much does that increase, or is it just kind of going to continue as you were suspecting from the beginning?
I think it actually is going to accelerate. So I think there's a couple of things. I think I hope what we're going to find is we're going to find more folks who, are, let's say, 5, 10, 15 years into their careers now thinking hard about, how important is quality of life to me, given the fact that we are in this new normal where we simply do not have to come into a physical office. I mean, again, if I'm an employee at Twitter or Square or Facebook and told that I never have to come to a physical office again and I can live anywhere, I mean, that is going to prompt a lot of conversations with families about, is this the right time to really think about coming back? So I think that whole aspect is very real. I think on the other end of the spectrum, what you're going to be finding is with college students, obviously, hearing these reports, up to 20% are taking a gap year for their freshman year. I think just this mentality that you have to, do your tour of duty, in investment banking in New York City, or to be a software developer, you need to do your tour of duty in the Bay Area. I absolutely think that is going to change. And I think you're going to find more people that say, hey, I want to work for a company that embraces, the aspect of being able to work from anywhere we are, out of necessity. We've all gotten really good at these tools, and companies have learned, just like school teachers have had to in the last few months, how to use these tools. And so I absolutely believe that this feeling that we need to live in a certain place in order to be close to the companies in the industry that we want to work for is just simply not going to be the case the way it has in the past. So no, I think it's absolutely going to accelerate the trend. The thing, though, that I think will lag, unfortunately, is still going to be the venture capital community's buy-in to the need to be out here. I still think there's an enormous disconnect between, venture capital firms that are many times still based on the coast that feel that, hey, we may make a token, investment, in the Midwest or one of the, what they just kind of label as flyover states, just to show some geographic diversity in our portfolios. But I think it's still going to take a little bit more time for them to recognize that they really should be setting up roots in one of these cities, having a dedicated office where they have closer proximity to where these real opportunities are. Because again, it's not just that there's smart people in the Midwest that they could invest in, it's that the lion's share of the knowledge workers are going to now choose to live in more affordable places to be because they can, really, for the first time.
And Matt Booter, I'd love your perspective, because you still have a lot of connections and are in New York City quite often, which has been among the hardest hit with COVID and lockdowns and quarantine. What are you seeing from former colleagues, business contacts, others of perhaps New York City and people flocking away for a lot of reasons?
Yeah, and I'll speak up because there's someone mowing their lawn, which is one of the amazing things about being in Cleveland versus New York City is we have these cool things called lawns. So, I have a lot of friends still in New York. I still split my time in New York and Cleveland. And I don't know anyone that was previously in New York that is still there. And I think a lot of people, and I'm at an age where I'm about to turn 30 soon. And I think being in a city like New York is very fun when you're young, but this is definitely expediting people's opinions on where do I really want to grow up and grow a family. And I think that I would be surprised, to Matt's point, if everyone feels like they need to do their time in a New York City. I think that being able to work remotely has a ton of advantages, not just for the employee. I mean, I think you hear a lot of the pluses of, oh, I can travel now, I can do this. But as an employer, I think that things become, very objective when people are working remotely. There's, you can be very, very strategic and very, very efficient. I mean, myself, I take 10 plus meetings a day. Now that I can just do it on Zoom and do it with people all over the country, I'm way more efficient and my employees are way more efficient in sales. And so I think that, there are a lot of benefits of remote work for both sides of things. And I think that, being in Cleveland now, it's going to really, really, this community was going to grow like crazy now that people can still have a fancy job that may have originally not been here. And I think that we'll kind of start to multiply now that we're dispersed a little bit.
And I guess with the conversation having been people choosing to leave or looking to leave for other opportunities, then kind of the natural next step is what can cities, states, regions do to attract that talent? Because it's not so much a question of just, step one, leaving in New York or Silicon Valley or others, but then two is, how do Ohio cities, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, others compete against the Detroits or Indianapolises or the Austins or the Denvers? So kind of opening it up, I don't know if anyone has some ideas off the top of their head or some things that they've seen either from recruitment efforts for your own careers, opportunities, or for your companies. But Matt, maybe Golis, we can start with you, because I think I know you have quite a bit of passion around this topic.
Well, one thing I was just going to say, and this is really in reaction to the working from home phenomenon, is, I would hope that a lot of these cities that have been programmed into thinking, oh, we need to offer, tax incentives that really are more geared around office space savings and payroll tax savings and so forth around having your physical headquarters here. I hope they start shifting a lot of that focus to, here's the quality of life advantages of living in these cities. Because again, you're going to have a lot of companies that aren't making a choice to relocate based upon office space, or those traditional metrics that, city governments are using as incentives to attract companies. So, it's something as simple as, and it's interesting because Detroit actually did this in Silicon Valley. I want to say maybe it was about 8 to 10 years ago, where they literally had billboards on Highway 101 running right through Palo Alto, Menlo Park, that was talking about, come work for Quicken Loans in downtown Detroit. You can buy a house for $200,000 and everything, cost of living is less than half everything else. And they obviously were just trying to attract, Michigan boomerangers to come back to Michigan. And again, it was just one of these things that when you see a ton of billboards there for tech companies, it was kind of stood out a bit. And I almost think that's almost the types of things that cities need to do on the coast to remind people about kind of what they're missing. Again, I hope they don't just try to do it with just tax incentives to convince companies to take out a lot of physical office space, because that's, again, kind of been the method of attracting companies here. So it's going to take a little bit more creativity, but I think a lot of it is just simply educating people out of the area. Don't focus so much on reminding people how great it is to live where they are if they're already here, but really educating people outside of the area about how much it's changed.
And
Yeah,
Jennifer,
I think that's a great point. Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, even my husband said, because he grew up here, when he came back, it's a completely different place as well. And I mean, we have to realize that any individual makes the decision about where they live and work concurrently. Like, both of those factors really matter. And so I do think elevating, like, the cost of living is a real benefit. And so let's not hide behind it. There are some tangible benefits on lifestyle, cost of living, commute time. I mean, I think it's fantastic that you can live in a great suburb with phenomenal schools, and were you to commute to an office, get there in 15 minutes. So there's a lot of those things that matter. But I also think it's, as a marketer, I think about how we elevate the stories and successes of individuals and companies. And so, like, one of the things we can keep doing is just building really great companies with phenomenal people and allowing their successes to shine in different places. But certainly there's, the personal angle and understanding, like, the rich culture and change that has happened over the years. I think I'm sort of the target market for boomerangs because I got married a year ago, we're about to start a family, and I still have a very tight-knit network in San Francisco. My book club actually is primarily from the Midwest, and I'll tell you, probably at least half of them were already thinking about, relocating elsewhere, coming back to the Midwest even before this hit. And I know it's been hard for them to weather through it, like, without family there. And so it's something that's already top of mind. I think that we need to just activate those, what folks are already thinking about, by reminding them about how much culture and opportunity resides right here in the Midwest.
Amen. And your point about the marketing, as a marketer myself, I could not agree more. A little biased, but I do think that the importance of just changing that narrative of, the mistake on the lake. People love, I mean, the unfortunate thing is, we as Clevelanders, we like to joke about it. We like to make fun of that stuff. I think that expands past Cleveland, unfortunately, across Ohio. But the truth is, like, that narrative has to change internally in order for that to change externally. And so the more stories we can tell about the pluses, the better. And that's why groups like OhioX, unpaid plug, are so important. Being able to give us opportunities to talk all day about how much we love our, Cleveland and Columbus. There's many other areas in Ohio that are thriving. That needs to be said, because I think in SF and in New York, everyone obviously thinks they're in the greatest city of all time, and they don't really think about the other places. And so we as ambassadors of our city, need to speak loudly about it.
And then I think, we've been talking about tech and even names like Facebook and Twitter and others have been mentioned, but being in Ohio, the tech ecosystem is continuing to build. And it's, not the size of a Silicon Valley or New York City even. But so for more traditional corporations or middle market companies, which employ most Ohioans, and I think Nationwide's a good example where amidst COVID, they announced that they're going to do a pretty drastic downsizing of physical office space. And they're going to still have some of those hubs, like the downtown Columbus location and a couple others in Columbus. And then also, I think 4 total in the United States, including 2 in Columbus, I believe, if the numbers are correct. But what can the traditional business community do because they will be a part of those that are recruiting against some of these tech companies. And again, if you can work for a Facebook but live wherever you want, or work for Twitter, or work for an Olive, and you don't necessarily have to be, in that downtown skyscraper, whether it's in any Ohio city or anywhere else in the country. What would that message be to some of those traditional companies in order to perhaps recruit some of these top talents, since location is not necessarily the driving factor for people pursuing career opportunities these days? Matt Golis, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, number one, when people talk about, particularly university recruiting and different companies recruiting on campus, et cetera, I mean, the one thing that people tend to forget about, like with Silicon Valley, is, I mean, when it comes to like CS programs, I mean, there's Stanford, there's Cal, and they actually only create a couple hundred graduates out of that program every year. So there are more companies that are recruiting those, the absolute number of graduates in CS than there actually are graduates to hire. So I mean, that's why there's such a supply and demand imbalance of when it comes to local hiring and trying to attract talent, particularly in engineering in the Bay Area. The great thing that we have out here is there is enough supply simply by virtue of the size of Ohio State, Miami University, certainly Case Western, and some of the other regional schools, to be able to really meet the demand of, I think, companies, not just the hot tech companies and startups, but also, those kind of middle market companies that you're describing. So I don't think that that's going to be changing anytime soon. Again, I think, depending upon how quickly things get back to normal with the virus, in terms of people feeling like, I want to go to a school once I know that I'm going to have a true college experience. But I think the absolute numbers of hiring, I don't think it's hurting yet the companies. I mean, just when I've talked with seniors, like at Ohio State, we have some interns who are working with us over the summer. And I mean, some of these kids are still not committing to their first job for 2 to 3 months before graduation. I mean, in the Bay Area, people are trying to be convinced to drop out as sophomores. So I mean, it's a huge difference in how much they're trying to meet all of the unfilled positions out there relative to here. But I think that I think when the companies that are going to be hiring now are going to be companies out of this area that are encouraging people to live here, knowing that they can work from anywhere. So I don't necessarily think that's going to penalize, the more traditional, larger employee-based types of companies that are already here, because I think you're already going to have the desirability of the quality of life that is going to raise all boats, not just for the startups and the hot tech companies, but also for the more traditional companies. I mean, just to give you an example, I mean, Facebook and Google, I live in New Albany, Facebook and Google, have huge data centers that they're opening, making a huge commitment to the area. They actually are not, I don't think they're hiring a ton of people. I mean, it's a data center. It's not like they're hiring an enormous product management, marketing type workforce. So, there's a ton of different companies that people can go to. I still think that, until we're in a position where we have a lot more demand than supply, I think it's still pretty much in balance here, which is another benefit, by the way. I think it's that imbalance that obviously has thrown the cost of living completely out of whack, particularly for non-tech workers and on the coasts.
Jennifer, any thoughts? Because I know you all work with a lot of healthcare hospital systems, because those are obviously very location dependent. Maybe less so on the tech side, but certainly for the practitioners. But I would be curious of what you're seeing from that perspective, kind of in the healthcare field.
Yeah, I mean, I still think, to Matt's point, those opportunities are going to still exist moving forward. And in fact, that the healthcare industry is more important than ever right now. And I think that we'll continue to see a lot of emerging companies spun up, or kind of in the spirit of 2030 is in 2020, where kind of more emerging products are getting more adoption, just given the current scenario. I think more broadly, what companies can be thinking about is also just investing in employees and talent and career pathing. So because I find here that, you know, relative to Silicon Valley, where I think there's often a bias for kind of more specialized roles, especially in engineering, product, even product marketing, whereas, you know, it's more kind of how do you find smart people and nurture and grow them here, that especially as we are in this new normal that will continue to unfold moving forward, investing in learning, investing in mentorship, rotational programs, having that openness, I think will be important for a lot of the.
We lost you.
I think we lost you real quick, but Matt Buder, if you want to hop in and maybe offer some thoughts, and
Yeah, well,
as Jennifer gets reconnected.
Yeah, I'm getting lucky because she's saying all the things I wish I would have said. So I can just echo that. Yeah, investing in the community is. Oh, she's back. All right, you're gonna say it better than me, so you can finish up, Jennifer.
Sorry, I cut out for a minute there. I missed what you just said.
You're on a roll though. Investing in the community and everything. I'll let you, yeah.
I think I've had my piece. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, no, I just to tag on, I think both big and small companies, the more we can invest in students and working with the schools, obviously I think when you're a bigger company, you probably have a bigger balance sheet. And so the more you can sponsor pitch competitions and meetups, the better. It helps you, it helps startups, it helps everyone. So I'm all for it, yeah.
Great. And as we start to approach the 1 hour mark, we can end with a bit of a around the horn. We're perhaps either some type of final comment or even a prediction of what you're seeing or what you think around kind of this growing this pipeline, whether it's about recruiting talent as they're looking to leave some of these coastal hubs for a more affordable living, or even things like second or third headquarters for some of these tech companies, which at least in Columbus, there's a number of them, which have really big impacts because they drop 50, 100, 150 jobs into cities. But Matt Buder, if we want to maybe start with you, we'll go to Jennifer and then Matt Golis to end.
Yeah, no, I would just like to say that, like, I feel very strongly about paying it forward as much as possible, because the biggest reason our company has succeeded is because of this community. And anyone that needs help, whether it's an introduction to an investor, a potential client, maybe a co-founder, very easy to reach me, Matt at medpilot.com. I'd love to help. I love meeting people. That's my favorite part about being an entrepreneur. So don't be shy.
Great. Well, I am on board with the a lifting all boats approach. I think one of the really unique things about the Midwest is really just the passion and the community. And I feel lucky that we came back before it got really hot, because I do think that more and more individuals are recognizing that opportunity and will really seize the moment to come back and accelerate their careers and lead really fulfilling lives here. And your point around the kind of second headquarters, I tell you, I wonder if a second headquarter is really a thing anymore. I think it still could be, but I also believe that more distributed models may be more common. One of the things that we've rolled out as a part of this grid approach is this notion of kind of a substation. So where 10 or more Olivians gather, we will invest in a small kind of co-working space so that folks can gather as needed. And that may not be every day of every week. So I really do wonder if the world of headquarters or second headquarters gets blown up a bit. Probably not entirely. I just think it will shift, and so too will the workforce shift to be located in different areas. like Columbus and Cleveland and other great parts of Ohio.
Yeah, that's great. You guys both hit the nail on the head. You kind of hit most of the major talking points. You know, I really, again, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think this whole aspect around, you know, quality of life and people just simply reevaluating where they are and, you know, what are the things they're missing out on personally because of where they are, that they don't need to pay their dues in some of those cities the way they have in the past anymore. And again, I think a lot of that comes down to, because it's not like they're necessarily going to be seeking it out. I mean, it's not so much that they're individually going to say, okay, I really want to see what's changed in my hometown, or I want to see, you know, what it's like with some of the startup activity and who's getting funded in the Midwest. But I think it's going to take more of those cities and the whole area in general marketing itself for all of the advantages that it has. I mean, when I've told people in Columbus, if you're thinking about a position, they've asked me about a position in San Francisco, I said, if you're not getting paid at least 150% more, don't even consider taking it, because these arbitrary cost of living adjustments are just completely inaccurate. And so I don't think people really know the disparity, the delta between the cost of living, which then ultimately translates into their standard of living, that they have completely underestimated. And on the flip side, when you've, you know, lived with and tolerated the high cost of living, and you know, you're not going to the beach or to the mountains every week, you know, it's something you may enjoy a few days a year because you're so busy starting a company, you know, you realize that, hey, when you want to do those things, you can fly to them and get a lot of the benefit, but it's the other, you know, 360 days a year that you're absolutely going to love the short commute, the fact that people are nice, the fact that people are not going to leave you in the middle of the night, you know, stick-to-itiveness, the work ethic. I mean, those are the things that you enjoy here 360 days a year. It's maybe the 5 days a year when you're somewhere else to escape, you know, the hot and humidity, whatever, that you're going to miss it. So I'll bet on the 360 days versus the 5.
Well, that's a great place to end, Matt. Thank you very much. And Matt and Jennifer and Matt, thank you for sharing your story with us today and doing all that you're doing to help build Ohio, and through your work in the tech sector, and also for moving back. So thank you to you three, and then everyone who tuned in today for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. We'll be posting this online on our YouTube page. If anyone wants to look back on it or share it with others, or perhaps send it to some friends in one of the big coastal hotspots, and as they're looking to potentially to move out. And as a couple people, Matt Buder mentioned, on our LinkedIn page, we link to each of these three's hyperlink to their pages. So if anyone wants to connect with them, please by all means go to our LinkedIn. It's just OhioX. And you'll find the contact information for everyone who's on the panel today. So thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate your time, and look forward to having more of these again soon. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.